The early 1900s was a time of wondrous inventions, and there was nothing more wondrous than the three huge passenger liners to be built at the Harland and Wolff shipyards in Belfast, Ireland. In 1908, construction commenced on the first of three sister ships on a scale of which had never been seen before. Olympic would be the first and the only of the three to survive to see its intended use as a passenger liner, or to complete the transatlantic voyage to New York. Titanic, without a doubt, is the world's most legendary ship and would be the second to be completed. Its legendary sinking is still making headlines to this day, and its name is used extensively as a synonym for disaster. The third and largest of the three to be completed was Britannic. Her increased size over her younger siblings was a direct result of Titanic's disastrous sinking. Work on Britannic would be halted pending the redesigning of any flaws found in construction, materials, or design that may have contributed to the loss of Titanic. During her reconstruction, Britannic's fate would be sealed when the British Admiralty requisitioned her for a hospital ship. The British were suffering huge losses in the Dardanelles during World War I, and a ship the size of Britannic could supply tens of thousands of badly needed beds for the sick and wounded. In the theater of war, Britannic's life would be cut short, never realizing her intended purpose as one of the most opulent passenger liners ever built. Though evidence supporting both theories of the ship being sunk by torpedo or she was struck by a mine exists, the definitive answer that caused the ship to sink so much faster than her sister Titanic is still a mystery. After all her modifications, Britannic sank in less than an hour, settling on her starboard side in nearly 400 feet of water at the bottom of the Aegean Sea. It would take 50 years before the technology that could allow divers to venture to these depths would be developed. It would also take a huge amount of support equipment. In 1975, famed underwater explorer Jacques Cousteau would locate the wreck. Using a tri-gas mixture, Cousteau and his team would film for the first time the final resting place of Britannic.
In his heavy, oversized tanks, each diver carries a carefully prescribed breathing mixture of helium, nitrogen, and oxygen, adjusted to the extreme depths of the dive.
It would take another 20 years for this technology to filter down to anyone willing to take on a challenge like Britannic. In 1998, Nick Hope and Starfish Enterprises organized a British-led international dive team to explore Britannic, marking the second expedition of its kind. The wreck lies just outside of the port of Nicolo, 2.5 miles from the island of Kea. The position places the wreck in the middle of the Kea Channel, a route heavily traveled by large ships transiting in and out of the Aegean Sea, Adriatic, and Western Mediterranean. Even with the required permits and marine notifications, these huge ships pass the area uncomfortably close. To help solve some of these issues, the Solaris Tug Company has donated the use of the 110-foot tugboat Atlas for the duration of the expedition. The steel hull and superstructure of Atlas will reflect a large echo on the radar screens of other ships and will make for a stable platform for the divers. In addition, an experienced captain and crew will also help to keep any ships that stray too close at a safe distance, or in the event the dive team has to go adrift during the long decompression. The captain of Atlas feels it's too rough to conduct dive operations. The first day of diving is canceled. Though seas may be too rough for diving, they're no match for Atlas, and the team heads out to verify the wreck's location and to set up the navigational equipment.
Just we are now online with our longitude, and we are exactly to north to find the exact position of the wreck.
Battling the rough seas, Atlas begins a search pattern, but the sonar reveals nothing but a featureless bottom. The land-based repeater fails when the line of sight is blocked by the hill too close to where the antenna is mounted. The antenna will have to be relocated. The work will run late into the evening.
So we can have some power for the differential. Like navigate mode. Let it average, basically just draw a swirl to see where it wants to go for about, half an hour. And then I'm going to pick the middle of that swirl and say, right, that's good enough. We'll call that the truth. and then we'll use that as the coordinates for the base station, and it'll use that to calibrate all the arrows out of GPS. And for next time we come back here, as long as I remember the magic numbers for what this mast is,
and we stick the aerial in the same place.
And we stick the aerial in the same place, any marks that we take this time will be valid.
The next day, a minor problem with the ship's antenna occurred, but it's quickly remedied with a makeshift support.
Now we put the bottle between it so there's not much whip on it, so it doesn't accentuate the movement.
Within minutes, the sonar picks up a large target below. A shot line is tossed in, marking the location of the wreck and the official start of the expedition. Once the decompression station has been assembled, the first team dons their heavy gear to make the long descent to secure the downline to the wreck. In a method known as live boating, Atlas will approach the buoy to the downline in the upcurrent side to drop off the divers. A stairway would need to be constructed to clear the high gunnels of Atlas. Each diver will be carrying nearly 200 pounds of life support equipment, which would make it impossible for a diver to roll over the side of a tugboat. But from here, gravity does the rest. Once in the water, the divers can drift effortlessly towards the downline to make their descent. A huge gaping blast hole is the first thing to come into view as you drift down into the blue abyss. Large enough to insert a house, it gives easy access for divers to explore for clues to the mystery of the roll-up doors. It was speculated that the blast from the explosion misaligned the automatic roll-up doors as well as these open ports, which may have contributed to the rapid foundering. Surprisingly, much of her railing on the bow is still intact. The hawser reel is secured to the deck as well as other fittings such as these bits. Just aft across the cavernous void of the blast hole, you can just make out the ghostly silhouette of the upper decks and the pilot house. Much of the wreck is covered in over 80 years of marine crustaceans like the oysters and yellow sponges that have taken up residence on the railings. All too soon the dive is over and it's time to make the lengthy ascent. At around 200 feet, you are greeted by a support diver, checking to see if all is well and making an account of all the divers for the day. Reaching the decompression station, the divers can rid themselves of any unnecessary equipment or stage bottles. Later, the shallow support divers make their rounds, checking on divers for signs of oxygen toxicity and removing used stage bottles to put back on board Atlas. Utilizing these semi-closed rebreathers with oversized tanks, some of the support divers and cameramen could spend up to 5 hours in the water without surfacing. Now that all of the divers have been accounted for, Kostas Nismas, owner of the Greek Dive Center, takes the opportunity to deploy his ROV to search out in the open seabed for other wreckage. The ROV finds what appears to be part of a steam whistle and one of the smokestacks that fell off during the ship's plunge to the bottom. Entanglements with ROVs is always a problem. Here is no exception, as Britannic's huge boat davits lend themselves to the task. Soon the tenders dislodge the cable and the ROV is pulled back on board, no worse for wear and tear.
What do I think? I think I did a 12-minute bottom time and spent the entire time attaching the hawse from this thing, but it was still awesome.
What'd you think?
Oh, it's easy. Easy dive.
Today was an easy day.
The visibility's good.
Visibility was great.
Yes. I saw the whole bow and the brake. I didn't go any further.
333 feet and the thing blew in. At least it didn't flood though. It cracked all the way around here, but it didn't break entirely.
Well, I guess until it floods, you really can't bitch about it.
Oh no, I'm sending it back.
The last few divers have made their final ascent to the surface. It's time to pull up the decompression station and head back to port to reorganize for the following day's dives.
No, it was a great experience for me. I mean, I just couldn't believe the sheer size of it. That was the first thing that I thought when I got on it is that it's huge, and anything that you grab onto is like, it's just massive.
Each day that provides good weather ardently pushes the expedition forward. The morning opens with a stiff breeze. Diving has been canceled for the day. Later, as the day wears on, the winds abate. The team heads out to drop off a mooring in the stern to prepare for future dives later in the week. Checking the existing mooring revealed that the heavy seas had worked the shackle loose on the downline to the bow.
Didn't come out of the shackle.
If this would have happened during a dive, it would have led to a potential disaster. The divers would be left with no support and drifting on their own for hours in a channel heavily traveled by large cargo vessels. Not planning for a dive, there was little equipment to choose from on board. John Chatterton had his rebreather on board and Rob Royal scrounged up enough gear to use as a support diver. The plan now was to abandon the bow and tie in the new mooring at the stern. With the rebreather optimizing his breathing mixture, John regains the surface in a surprisingly short runtime. With the downline set, it's time to move on, and the next day brings calm winds and bright sunshine. A perfect note to end on for a once-in-a-lifetime adventure. Even with the visibility well over 100 feet, the wreck is so large you can capture only a small portion of it at a time. The upper deck is where the captain and the elite first-class passenger cabins were located. Never to see the opulent first-class passengers strolling carefree along her wooden deck, the promenade now appears as a ghostly tunnel leading to a forgotten time. The crane used for loading passengers' luggage and cargo is still poised, ready for loading. The cargo holds are an empty reminder of a bygone era. The aft mast looks like a shadow in the sand as it settled on the bottom with the stays still attached, lying on either side. Looking up from the bottom at a depth of 390 feet, Britannic's trademark boat davits loom over 130 feet above, like two swords being pointed towards the surface in defiance of the elements. It's hard to believe that after more than 80 years, Britannic's hull is yet to give up her elegant figure. Being supported by nothing more than her structural integrity, Britannic leaves areas no submersible or ROV could ever access. Coming up into the aft-covered promenade, the wooden planks that once covered the decks have long since rotted away, leaving nothing but a few ridges of caulking and fasteners. A window to the second-class gymnasium whose equipment was never installed. The fair leads and deck winches used for handling the massive hawser line still holds fast to the deck. Though all of the non-structural partitions are gone, the interior appears to be structurally sound. In comparison to other shipwrecks of varying size and age, Britannic is without a doubt one of the most intact and well-preserved shipwrecks in the world, as well as being a nearly exact duplicate of her sister, Titanic.